I'd like to now begin our awards ceremony. So this year the board created a new awards program, and our purpose was to sustain the field by acknowledging excellence, to motivate the field through the examples of exemplary practitioners, and to create an impetus and a model for continuous professional improvement in our field. So I'd like to invite Kendall Brown and Kim Andrews, who are headed up our awards committee, to present this year's awards. So, Ken?
Thank you, Larry. First, I want to note that tonight is not the only time we will honor awardees. In fact, Friday morning, first thing, Professor Makoto Suzuki will be given a special award. And then tomorrow afternoon, our last event from 4 to 5 is a sort of awards showcase where Tim Gruner and Doug Roth will both speak at greater length. So those award activities that will be ongoing every day of the conference. Our first award goes to Ken Lam. Ken has been at many of our NAJGA events. He was here in San Diego at the International Association of Japanese Gardens Conference in 2010. And Ken, you might know, was the cover boy for our NAJGA Journal in 2018, where his ink painting was featured. And that really goes to Ken's, one of the talents that the NAJGA committee wanted to acknowledge as key to this field is the diverse talent and knowledge that Japanese garden creation and fostering requires. So the NAJGA motto is sustainability in 3 dimensions: human culture, horticulture, business culture, and Ken Lam personifies all of those. A trained artist, a master of Japanese aesthetics, a horticulturalist, a tree pruner, a business person with a great restaurant and a nursery, and maybe most important, the magic key is his sociability. He's one of the friendliest and most outgoing people you'll ever meet, and he does all of these things without any Japanese garden community down under in Australia. For obvious reasons, he could not join us from Australia, so I think we now have the video in honor of Ken Lam.
Hello, my name is Jane Smith. I'm the former Mayor of Central Coast Council and the President of Gosford Sister City Association. For over 30 years, Gosford has had a sister city relationship with Edogawa in Japan, and these commemorative gardens have been an important part of that relationship. Ken has been committed to the sister city relationship for a very long time, and it really has highlighted the positive relationship in terms of partnerships and cultural exchange. We're very grateful and appreciative of Ken's contribution to the gardens, but also to the sister city relationship.
My name's Tim Braham. I'm the director of the Gosford Regional Gallery and the Edogawa Commemorative Garden. These gardens were designed and built in 1994 by Ken Lam. Ken continues to maintain the garden, coming 3 times a year to prune all of the special bushes and to oversee the maintenance, and has developed an ongoing maintenance plan for the next 20 years for these gardens. Without Ken's support, there's no doubt that the Edogawa Commemorative Garden would not be what it is today.
I can think of really nobody more deserving of an honor than Ken Lam. He is a man of many talents. He's a fine arts painter, a garden designer, a garden builder, an aesthetic pruner, a successful businessman with a nursery, a garden design business, as I recall being there, even a restaurant. He really does it all, and he does it with skill, with thoughtfulness, with humor, with self-effacement. And he does it almost all alone in Australia, where there isn't a Japanese garden community. Ken was a longtime board member of the International Association of Japanese Gardens. He hosted, in fact, their very last conference in Sydney in 2012, which was a wonderful event. He has been a great contributor to NAJGA. He's jumped the pond, the big Pacific Ocean, several times to participate in our conferences. I remember at the Hilo Hawaii event, When we had a bit of a lull one afternoon, Ken sensed it, jumped in, and led a wonderful ad hoc pine pruning workshop, not just how to rescue a somewhat dilapidated pine, but to show it to its best advantage from several angles as you turned around paths in the garden. Ken is also the only artist to ever be featured on the cover of the NAJGA journal, which is testimony to just a number of his talents. So I'm just delighted that NAJGA is awarding Ken this year.
I'm glad I'm not wearing the same clothes in that video in here. So since you've already been a little attuned to Australian accents from those two people in Gosford, I think we're now ready to hear Ken Lam's acceptance speech.
Thank you to the North American Japanese Garden Association for this award. Over 40 years I've had many teachers and collaborated with many fine garden practitioners. Now, nearing 70 years old, I was heartened by Hugo Tori's observation that in Japan I'm still considered a young gardener. We built a Japanese garden for a Tibetan temple in Sydney. The High Lama loved the garden, and he said, "The garden speaks to the heart in a language without words." Indeed, for me, this is the basis of all gardens. Thank you.
All right, to do our next presentations, Kim Andrews.
Hi, everybody. Ken is a hard act to follow because he has been around in this field for so long and knows everybody so very, very well, and knows all of us and all of our work so very, very well. So I'm here. NAJGA would like to honor the accomplishments and achievements of Dr. Makoto Nakamura and Mr. Tokushiro Tamane, who Dr. Nakamura is a professor of landscape architecture at Kyoto University School of Forestry, and Mr. Tamane is the head gardener of Kinkakuji in Kyoto. And we're honoring them because they have really been examples of collaboration and an example of how Japanese gardens are built by many people. So there's designers, there's gardeners, there's technicians who all put our hands together to make a garden what it is. They've both worked here in San Diego with Dr. Uesugi, who we heard from his son earlier today. So Dr. Nakamura and Mr. Tamane are our awardees today for their accomplishments of collaboration.
Hi, I'm Bill Castellan, and in September 2001, myself and my good friend Dick Austin had the great opportunity to spend the month with Mr. Tamane at Kinkakuji. We met him several times at seminars at the Friendship Garden in Balboa Park in San Diego, and it was actually Dick's idea to approach him and ask him if he ever had people come and work with the crew. And he said yes. So September of 2001, yeah, that September, we spent the month in Kyoto. Not only did we work at Kinkakuji, mostly we were doing maintenance, but also at related temples and at one private client he had out in Miyama, out in the country. So it was quite an experience. But the first thing I have to say about Mr. Tamane is I don't think I've ever met a more generous human being. It was beyond belief. He paid for our apartment. He basically paid for everything. He gave us stuff. You couldn't go out with him and show interest in anything without him buying it. We had to be very careful about that. He was just an amazing human being. And I think the most wonderful thing for me was feeling like I was amongst my people when I was with him and with the crew. This is where I wanted to be in my life, doing this. And now I'm with people who have been steeped in it for 1,000 years. I'm a beginner and a newcomer to all this. I've always been attracted to the aesthetic, but now here I was immersed in it. And that was so wonderful. And I gotta say, the training we had here previously made us prepared for it, understood what was going on, and felt fairly much at home, even with the lack of communication. But Mr. Tamane took us many places, many gardens that we would never see. We went out to dinners at places I could never imagine eating. Just amazing. Anyway, I could go on forever. And if you catch me sometime, I'd be glad to go on forever with you. So all I can say is he's a wonderful human being, and we're lucky to have had him and met him, and all of you who've worked with him, you probably feel the same way I do. So thank you, Mr. Tamane.
Dr. Makoto Nakamura has been an influential figure in the research and design of Japanese gardens for over 6 decades. He became a lecturer in landscape architecture at Kyoto University in 1960 and continued teaching there as a professor until his retirement in 1991. His contributions to advancing the art of Japanese gardens in North America began in 1963 when he designed the Japanese garden at Dawes Arboretum in Ohio as part of a cultural exchange program. He stayed on site for 8 months as he guided the construction of the garden to ensure that the built landscape would reflect the sensibilities of his design. Dr. Nakamura went on to work on hundreds of other Japanese gardens throughout Japan and North America, including being part of a committee guiding the excavation and restoration of Byodo-in in Uji, and most recently, Daimonji Temple in Ibaraki. In 2001, Dr. Nakamura created a 2-week intensive seminar for foreigners at the Research Center for Japanese Garden Art and Historical Heritage in Kyoto with the assistance of Mark Keane, which continues to welcome people outside of Japan to learn design principles and techniques. Dr. Nakamura was also close friends with Dr. Takeo Uesugi and visited the U.S. several times, offering his support on projects such as the Japanese Friendship Garden in San Diego, where he was involved with the boulder arrangement during the Phase 2 expansion. He also introduced Mr. Tokushiro Tamane, the master gardener of Kinkakuji, to Dr. Uesugi, which opened the opportunity for Mr. Tamane to offer his expertise on gardens throughout the U.S., including the Charles Wood Japanese Garden in Mobile, Alabama. In 2014, during one of his trips to the Japanese Friendship Garden, Dr. Nakamura received a phone call from the director of Dawes Arboretum, who invited him to visit the garden he designed 50 years earlier to offer recommendations for garden improvements. He agreed and flew to Ohio to see his garden. When asked about his thoughts on Japanese gardens, he called them very peculiar and filled with symbolic meaning. Whereas English gardens symbolize real landscapes, he noted that a Japanese garden is more dreamlike and added, "It's a very simple thing." Dr. Nakamura's love and passion for Japanese garden art are truly embodied within his life's work in education and garden design. His openness to share his wisdom has helped to advance Japanese garden art, both within and outside of Japan.
A little personal note about Nakamura-sensei. My wife and I were in Kyoto maybe 15 years ago, and I contacted him and wanted to talk with him. And he said, yeah, well, let's walk around the gardens of Nara. He was maybe 80 at the time, and we walked in the morning and then had lunch, and we walked in the afternoon, and I was getting pretty tired. And he had one of these step counters in his pocket, and he said, we've gone 7,000 steps today. I want to get to 10,000. So then we walked to more gardens and more gardens. We got to 10,000. He said, okay, let's have dinner. amazing energy and commitment.
Takeo Uesugi was most important in the renewal of the San Diego Garden. A quarter of a century ago, Takeo took me to nearby Spanish restaurant to explain his idea of renewal. I decided to assist Takeo with my friend Tamane-san. Since then, with help of Keiji Uesugi and many other people, the garden surely grew perfectly. I am so happy Japanese Friendship Garden in San Diego was awarded a prize by North American Japanese Garden Association. Thank you.
Our next award is to honor another part of the Japanese garden experience, and without people like this, no gardens would exist. It's the philanthropists, the patrons, the people who have the vision, the desire, the dollars, the commitment to make them happen, to hire the designers, the builders, and the people who foster them. And so to honor that kind of wise patronage, which is fundamental to gardens, NAJGA gives its next award to John Anderson. John Anderson said to me once a few years ago, he said, Ken, I want to be remembered not as the person who spent millions of dollars to build a Japanese garden. I want to be remembered as the person who spent millions of dollars to build a Japanese garden that changes people's lives. And that really is John Anderson's mission. And so to read a letter from his father and to accept the NAJGA award, David Anderson.
Thank you to NAJGA. My dad, he's in Florida right now, and he sent me 3 versions of this letter. I only read the last one for editing, and I'm happy and somewhat surprised to say that I didn't need to change much in this letter. But here it is, dated October 25th, 2021, to the members of the NAJGA Board of Directors. I am sorry I'm not attending your meeting this year. I have greatly curtailed my travels since March of 2020. I am proud to have my son David representing me and our garden at your conference. David took over operations of the garden a little over 10 years ago and has greatly flourished under his leadership. I am honored to receive your Lifetime Achievement Award. Building the garden over the last 43 years has been a real joy for me. This award really should go to Hoichi Kurisu, the designer and builder of the garden. From the beginning of our friendship in 1978, I put total trust in him. He had total control of every aspect of the garden's design. The many decades of working side by side with him are some of my best memories of my life. My first visit to Japan was right after my graduation from the University of Wisconsin in 1966. It was on this trip that I was first experienced the warm hospitality of the Japanese people, learned of their amazing culture, and became aware of their healing power of their gardens. When I returned to the States, I realized that one of my life objectives was to build a Japanese garden. It was my good fortune to meet and engage Hoichi Kurisu years later. Tens of thousands of people visit our garden every year. They learn about Japanese people and their culture, but their main experience is their discovery of peace and tranquility and the renewing spirit. This is what makes the efforts of our family and dedicated and hard-working garden team so worthwhile. With gratitude, John Anderson, Anderson Japanese Gardens. Thank you, NAJGA. And I'd like to recognize Tim Gruner from our team and Catherine Marsh of our team are both in attendance tonight. So without them, this is a real team effort.
In 1967, a year after graduating from the University of Wisconsin, John Anderson founded Anderson Packaging Incorporated. A few years later, upon inheriting and selling a third-generation family business, Anderson created a holding company to manage a series of small and medium-sized businesses that had been acquired. In addition to contract pharmaceutical packaging, the portfolio included an automotive parts manufacturer, a high-tolerance plastic injection molder, and a heat treater. In 1972, Anderson purchased a 5-acre wooded parcel just north of downtown Rockford and built a home on the hillside in 1975. The problem, however, was a soggy pond on the lowland portion of the property that had become a teenage hangout. Anderson had asked his gardener to clear the dead trees and heavy brush with the idea of creating a loosely designed Japanese-style pond garden. An ad for a Japanese garden builder, placed in Chicago's Japanese newspaper, and consultation with a few Japanese business owners generated no results. Changing courses by working with a local contractor, Anderson attempted a Japanese garden, but quickly realized the do-it-yourself effort was doomed. In 1978, Anderson visited Portland for a meeting about the possible acquisition of a new business. When the meeting ended quickly, and with a few hours to fill before his flight home, Anderson asked his cab driver to take him someplace interesting, which led to the discovery of the Portland Japanese Garden. Anderson was impressed. The Portland Garden reminded him of those seen on a post-college trip to Japan in 1966 and on a second journey to Japan with his wife Linda in 1973. Both trips were taken to visit his friend Akira Ono, president of Morinaga, a friendship that emerged as a result of their father's business relationship. Although the trips were general tours, Anderson was moved by the beauty of Japanese landscape, natural and man-made, and by ingrained Japanese hospitality. Particularly memorable was staying in the traditional inn section of Kyoto's Miyako Hotel, where guest rooms look into a garden. Nothing seen during a college trip to Europe could compare with the simple power of Japanese design. At the Portland Japanese Garden, these feelings returned. Learning the name of the Portland Garden's former curator, Hoichi Kurisu, who had led its growth from 1968 to 1972, Anderson found Kurisu's number in the phone book. He called Kurisu from the airport before returning to Chicago. With little idea of what he wanted exactly, and no sense of how long it would take, Anderson asked Kurisu if he could come to Rockford. Although skeptical, Kurisu promised to send Anderson a few articles on his projects. To Kurisu's surprise, Anderson read them and then called back, asking him to come to Rockford in the fall to create a Japanese garden around the pond. Kurisu's first visit in the fall of 1978 presented little more than a client anxious to do something quickly and a Japanese yukimi-style lantern sitting forlornly by a natural pond in a half-cleared tangle of trees and shrubs. However, the site, defined on the north by a hill leading down from the Anderson home and on the south by a natural spring-fed creek flowing west into the Rock River, was alive with possibilities. On that visit, Kurisu worked on the north side of the pond, the area directly visible from the house above. He noticed that in contrast to the other private garden clients he had met in Japan, working with his teacher Kenzo Ogata, who left design decisions to the garden builder, Mr. Anderson was more involved. At the conclusion of Kurisu's initial trip, Anderson asked if he wanted to come back the following spring to create a more substantial pond garden. Kurisu asked, "How far do you want to go?" Anderson shrugged and responded, "I don't know." Intrigued, Kurisu agreed to return when the weather warmed up. Little did John Anderson know that in Hoichi Kurisu, he had discovered a kindred spirit, another man with a vision. A decades-long collaborative effort ensued.
What a great video that was. Well, now, before there was NAJGA, there was Ski Living, the Journal of Japanese Gardening. Doug Roth has been the publisher and editor of Ski Living, and Tadao Goda is the art director and creates most of the illustrations and does much of the research. NAJGA would like to honor Doug and Tadao, their accomplishments and achievements in advancing our field. I know that they have been greatly influential on my work, and I think that most of us have been inspired by the study that they've done, the educational opportunities they've afforded others, the garden trips to Japan. And they have really been a big foundation, certainly, of the work that I have done. You guys were there putting information out into North America before other people had information at all to give. On behalf of all of us here at NAJGA that have been influenced by your work, I would like to award both of you. If you could come up here, please. This is a team effort, and so they get a team award. So thank you so much for your work on behalf of our field. Your accomplishments have made us all better at our jobs, better at the work we do, and better to fulfill our mission. So thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting us here this week. We see a lot of friendly faces out in the crowd. A lot of you have crossed paths with us through our magazine or through our tours to Japan. So it's nice to be among so many friends and to recall so many nice experiences we've had together. So we have been we've been in the field for about 30 years. 30 years. And mostly as we see our role as educators, particularly educating the English-speaking world about the Japanese tradition, the Japanese home and garden tradition. So about 20 years ago, we started doing guided walking tours of Kyoto, Japan. And we've been in Japan every spring and every fall for the past 20 years. So most of these events happen in the fall. So over the past 10 years, you've had many nice events, and we haven't attended any of them until today. We've been gone. But because of the travel situation, we are not doing our tours at the moment, and we're here in the country, and I thank Don Miners for calling us up and saying, why don't you come on out to San Diego? So thank you, Don. So 30 years ago, there were a few organizations that were starting to spread information about the Japanese tradition, and a few of them have come and gone. And 10 years ago, this one started. And I remember that. The three founders are very noteworthy people. And I remember talking about the founding of NAJGA, and I remember saying, if you hook your wagon to really can-do people, the type of gardeners that get their hands dirty and know how to do anything, you'll succeed where the other organizations failed. And somebody took that advice to heart, because I remember the very first time I heard about NAJGA's board, Tim Gruner was on the board. Where is he? And so was John Powell. And is Bill here? Bill Castellan? Are you here? That speech was awesome, man. You aced that speech. Yeah. So these men are all-stars. They're superheroes. They can do anything. When a pump breaks down, they can fix it. When a truck needs to be repaired, they can fix it. When a tree needs pruning, they can do it. When a group of 100 school kids shows up, they can handle the problem, or the challenge, not the problem. They can all give really nice speeches. As a good example was Bill's speech tonight. They can write articles for our journal. These guys can do anything. Really, I respect you so much. And I knew that NAJGA would succeed as soon as I heard that they were hitching a wagon to those kind of guys. So tonight this afternoon I spoke to many people, and it's interesting how many of you have different entry points into the tradition. Some of you are academic people who came in through a university role, or some of you are public garden managers, some of you are gardeners, carpenters. Wow, there's so many different entry points. How many people are here? 130 people? 130 different entry points. And that is remarkable. That is remarkable. The body of knowledge in each of these different categories has come into the room. So another point about that is that when you come in through a certain door, your understanding of the tradition is highly influenced by how you came in the door. So if you were, let's say, a bonsai artist, and you come in the door, you're going to be really interested in the trees in the garden. If you're an academic person, coming from a university, you might be very interested in history and documented information about Japan. If you are a koi enthusiast, today you would have been looking at the fish swimming back and forth, and you probably wouldn't have seen anything else. Yeah, so your entry point really determines what slice of the pie you understand. And our job as educators is to try to raise everybody's knowledge of the big picture understanding of the tradition. And 10 years ago, we switched the name of our magazine to Suzuki Living, because we think that the tradition is, honestly, it's a living environment for a family. It's a single family home. It's a family that lives there. And all of these other versions of it are very interesting, but if you go to Japan, you will see that for every public garden or every tourist place, there are 10,000 beautiful homes that have gardens around them. And we just can't access them because we're tourists. The honest interpretation of the Japanese tradition is that it is a living environment. It's not a tourist destination. So our primary goal with our magazine is to try to raise the big picture understanding of the tradition as that, and that's why we now call our magazine Suzuki Living Magazine. But tomorrow we'll talk a little more about this, and I know that they're kind of scared about what Roth might say. Some of you are really good friends, but some others, maybe you're a little worried about a loose cannon at the mic. All right. Well, anyway, we're very happy to be here. We see many, many friendly faces, and we're very, very, very honored to receive this award tonight. Thank you.
Doug and Tamao have had a huge impact in the field of Japanese gardens in America, in Japan, and worldwide. They've conveyed successfully a point of view. Basically, it's that gardens are for our better lives. And the shift from Journal of Japanese Gardening to Suzuki Living really put the living with gardens, living in this kind of humanized, acculturated nature first and foremost.
There, Doug and Tamao-san's, combine very strong force in terms of public education about Japanese garden. All through these years, they really made a Japanese garden much more available and wide and to the non-professional audiences. I would say they did really, in a sense, demystified the sort of, otherwise the sort of magical, Japanese garden design.
Doug single-handedly altered how we see Japanese gardens with 1,000 voices. So many people think that Japanese garden design is one thing, and Doug showed people how there's actually a myriad of voices in the Japanese garden community.
And I'm one of those guys who was desperately wanting to learn about Japanese gardens, and there just weren't many places, and I was constantly trolling the internet, and here's this thing called the Journal of Japanese Gardening all of a sudden. And I started seeing articles by this guy from Weatherford, Texas. I had no clue there was anybody in this part of the world that cared about Japanese gardens. John's my garden builder, maintainer, mentor, whatever, and that wouldn't have happened, again, without them.
For me, that magazine came at a perfect time in my career to see that there were actually people out there that had the same interest here in the United States. While it's helped me immensely, I think it's helped public gardens, especially in the United States and elsewhere, to be better. I mean, it really made us up our game.
What they did with the journal, they were speaking publicly when virtually no one else was in the field. You couldn't find information, and here it was in the journal. It was fundamentally important in my development as a gardener. And Doug and Tamao helped to move away from myth and more towards the fundamental connection between humans and nature, which really, at its core, I think that's the most important element of what a Japanese garden can be.
Training at Doug and Tamao's hands-on, professional level Japanese garden and pruning workshops has also opened many eyes. Participants become decidedly better at the craft by the end of 2 long days in the field with them. Many teacher accolades include students thanking their teachers for their patience. Participants at Doug's workshop would probably never list that as their takeaway impression of their lessons. Instead, Doug pushes us to be precise, to work faster, and to be aggressive. Be aggressive.
I was on my knees in an estate garden pulling weeds around a raised stone pathway. The owner of the property came out and asked me to prune a maple tree. And so I went home that evening and searched. That's how I found Sukiya Living. I would not have known very much at all about the Japanese style of landscaping if it had not been for Sukiya Living. Because I was on that subscription list, I received a flyer inviting me to the conference in Long Beach. I saw all of the names of people that I recognized from reading the magazine, and I knew I had to go. It was because I was a subscriber to the magazine, because I was afraid of pruning a Japanese maple, that I came to know about NAJGA, and that makes me eternally grateful.
I remember thinking that that Sukiya Living was very impactful because it was an active source of content. I could find out about maybe other people that have written articles, or just know that, I wasn't isolated, I wasn't by myself. The biggest accomplishment that Doug and Tamao had with their magazine was actually connecting people. So many friendships were made, so many opportunities.
So we want to thank Ken and Kim and the awards committee for taking on this task and really doing such a good job. Not that it was difficult to find people worth honoring, but to really choose the right people and to make this really inspiring. I know I'm inspired. So thank you, and thanks and congratulations. Sincere thanks and congratulations to the award, the honorees. You really are inspirations to all of us and to future generations, I think, in this field.
This is our last session, closing plenary for, I'll take my hat off, I'm indoors, show my long wavy hair, and call to order our last session of the day. This is an awards showcase. Two of our achievement awards for Doug Roth and Tamao Goda and John Anderson. The idea was to these are famous people who are a little bit mysterious. If they're hide and reveal gardens, there's more kind of hiding the person than revealing. So we thought we would sort of give the garden world an opportunity to get to know them now. For the obvious reasons of pandemic era travel, John Anderson is not here, but his longtime Chief Garden Curator Tim Gruner is here and is going to speak about working with John Anderson and his vision in Hoichi Kurisus for almost 40-ish sort of years. And then David Anderson will also be here to talk and ask questions. And then we will have Doug Roth be here in person. The man behind the curtain will be revealed and talk and available for questions. But before we do that, I'm going to go off the program that Marisa has made because this conference is about adaptability and resilience. And I think adaptability and resilience, as you probably could guess but may not know, a number of planned speakers canceled, couldn't get travel arrangements, decided not to do Zoom. And Marisa put together a plan B and a plan C and a plan D and arranged Zooms, and at least as far as I've seen, they've all gone together. So just in case we don't forget tomorrow, and personally as a member of the conference committee, I want to give a big round of applause to adaptability and resilience personified in Marisa, who's probably not here because she's out solving a problem. All right, with that spirit, I'd like to call to the podium Don Miners, who in fact was the person who nominated John Anderson for the NAJGA award and would like to say some remarks about John. Don.
I am, as advertised, Don Miners. I'm on the NAJGA board. Some time back, the powers that be asked me to be the treasurer. I don't know what they were thinking. And it has been my privilege and pleasure to nominate John Anderson for the NAJGA award. And you're going to hear history, you're going to hear all that stuff, so I'll throw in my little piece quickly. The part you haven't really heard in detail, John Anderson spent 20 years building this wonderful garden at his home. Millions of dollars, massive effort, and then he gave it away. He gave away his home and the land that the garden was on to a nonprofit, and it's now a public garden. And that to me, that just blew me away, because so much love, so much effort went into that. And there's a special vibe about that place, and I think it reflects the people that made it happen. John made some very wise and some very fortunate decisions in his life. He hired Koichi to build this thing, And there was some kind of a Vulcan mind meld that happened, and it just, it went off remarkably successfully. He also had the wisdom and good taste to marry a woman who supported him in that effort, his wife, Linda, and she's a very special lady. He was also very fortunate that Linda gave him a son, David, who is taken on the task of continuing the family's involvement in the garden. And that's very special. Generations going forward, because this is just an awesome place, and it wouldn't be the same without an Anderson presence there. He also got lucky enough to get Tim Gruner to be his curator and head gardener. And give it up for Tim. He's a... And by the way, speaking of generational succession, Tim's son is now on the staff at Anderson, so there may be another generation continuance going on there. We're all rooting for that, yes. In the process of working on this thing, the nomination, you don't just say, I want to nominate John Anderson. So while I was working on this, I got to wondering, just how does something this amazing get off the ground? How does it happen? In my own twisted little way, I got to thinking about, in the process of how it began, at some point there had to be a conversation between John and his wife about this thing. So if you would indulge me, imagine with me John sitting in his office, light bulb comes on, and he has this vision. And in his excitement, he calls Linda to tell her all about this thing. So I'm going to share with you what I think John's side of the conversation may have sounded like. And I'm sure I wasn't there, so I probably won't get it right, but maybe we'll have a little fun. So here's John. By the way, this is an office phone. For those of you under 40, it's connected to the wall by a cord. It's a very, very strange thing. So John, here's John calling Linda. Hi, dear. I've just had a great inspiration. Yes, another one. Remember that beautiful Japanese garden in Portland? Yeah, that's it. I want one of those in the backyard. No, I haven't been drinking. Well, no, the whole thing wouldn't really fit in the backyard, but you got to start somewhere. Yeah, there would be considerable disruption. Dump trucks, loads of boulders, trees and shrubs, excavators, cranes, bulldozers. Lots of noise, digging, city inspectors. I could go on. All right, I won't. Yeah, the neighbors probably won't like it very much. I know, if they get really mad, I'll buy them out, tear down the house, and build some more garden. How long will it take? Oh, probably not more than, 20 years. I'm sorry, when what freezes over? How much would it cost? You probably don't want to know. Come to think of it, I probably don't want to know. Hello? Hello? Anyway, it's an amazing thing.
Thank you.
So thanks everybody for all your warm support. I've been asked to provide a sense of who John Anderson is, and I don't trust myself enough to just go off the cuff, so I've got a prepared statement here. So how is it that a businessman of Swedish descent ends up building a widely known Japanese garden in an industrial city 80 miles west of Chicago? Just as a gardener learns from people who learn from people who learn from people as far back as there is time, it is basically the same for everyone. John's grandfather, Swan, was a Swedish immigrant. He was an inventor and an innovator. He came here seeking opportunity. John tells the story of a train ride in which Swan overheard two managers of Eskimo pie production. And they were discussing a problem. They could not make enough of them. And that was around 1914. Swan introduced himself and said he thought he could help. He went on to work with Eskimo pie and would end up patenting a machine that allowed the mass production of Eskimo pies. It was a huge success. Anderson Brothers Manufacturing, Swan's company, went on to specialize in the packaging of frozen confections and dairy products. They made machines that packaged things. John's father, Ralph, took over the company as a young man and elevated it to a new level. I was part of a crew that helped take care of Ralph's yard, which later, at the insistence of his son, would also have a small Japanese garden in the backyard built by Hoichi. Ralph was a no-nonsense guy that focused on quality and precision, an example that would serve his son well. John graduated from the University of Wisconsin in 1966 with a degree in business. There was some question as to whether he would graduate at all. His parents were concerned. John liked to have fun. In fact, he booked a famous band, the Turtles, to a party at his frat house, and he bankrupted the fraternity. So we're really happy he got that one out of the way early. In 1972, John and his wife Linda purchased a 5-acre site situated on the north side of a perennial stream, Spring Creek, with a large floodplain and a 70-foot bluff that paralleled the creek. The site had a marshy pond about 1/3 of an acre, which was surrounded by second-growth floodplain forest. It was also in 1972 that Hoichi Kurisu founded his own design-build firm, Kurisu International. In 1975, John and Linda built a home for their expanding family. Dave Anderson had already been in the world for 5 years at that point. They built the house on the bluff overlooking the pond. John's dream of a Japanese garden began to take shape. His first attempt to build it with local landscapers was a miserable failure, in his own words. It was on a business trip to Portland, Oregon in 1978 when things took a turn for the better. In the city exploring the possibility of buying a lumber company, it was apparent early that the deal would not work out. With time on his hands, he asked a cab driver to take him to the Portland Japanese Garden. The garden made him feel the way the great gardens of Japan had made him feel. I skipped a whole page, I think. Did I talk about the part of going to Japan? No. I skipped a page because it's on both sides. I'm sorry. It's printed on both sides. Not my normal. Dang it. Get the hook out, Brown. Yeah, take it back, people.
Take it back.
I am so sorry. Do we have time? Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Happy Together, The Machine, Trip, French Company.
Happy Together.
Yeah, I think that's where French Company. French Company?
Nope.
Okay, something happened right there. Okay, so Anderson Brothers Manufacturing had been building dairy packaging machines for many years that were licensed to a Japanese company, Morinaga Milk. Am I hitting on a couple cylinders here? Okay. John's father, Ralph, had a long business relationship with the company's owner, but it was more than business. It was also friendship. It was the son of Morinaga's owner, Akira Ono, that would provide John with a personal tour of Japan. John was deeply moved by the people, their culture of hospitality, the landscape, the art, and the gardens of Japan. He loved the way the gardens made him feel. The seed had been planted, the journey towards Anderson Garden had begun. After the trip, John began working as a sales rep for a French company that was engaged in blister packaging, which was an emerging technology. That's the little pills that you pop out of the plastic and foil packs. Clean and protected, a great delivery system. He thought I could set up my own company to do this work, and instead did that, instead of repping for a company. So in 1968, he formed Anderson Packaging, which went on to be a very successful company that packaged pharmaceuticals, toothpaste, Glade air fresheners, and many more things. Later, he inherited Anderson Brothers Manufacturing, sold it, diversified the family's manufacturing base with a portfolio of companies, including precision injection molding, heat treating of metals, manufacturing of a wide array of automotive parts, RV parts for campers, and more. Okay, In 1972, here we go. Okay, so you already heard that. House on the Bluff. It was in 1978, things took a turn for the better. In the city of Portland, exploring the possibility of buying a lumber company. It was apparent the deal would not work out. With time on his hands, he asked a cab driver to take him to the Portland Japanese Garden. The garden made him feel the same way the great gardens of Japan made him feel. The telephone number of Portland's second director, Hoichi Kurisu, was given to John by a Portland staff member. Hoichi had apprenticed with Ogata Kenzo from 1964 to 1968, moving on to become Portland Japanese Garden's second director from 1968 to 1972. John contacted Hoichi. Hoichi was surprised that someone would want him to come to the Midwest to build a garden. He visited the garden in the fall of 1978, and work began on the area of the pond near the house on the bluff. A 4-decade-long collaboration between Hoichi and John made its start. In effect, a backyard project spiraled marvelously out of control, as I like to say. As time went on, the enthusiasm between the two men for building gardens grew. Supporting the Kurisu crew during their typical twice-a-year visits for 2 weeks at a time was John's wife, Linda. The Andersons housed Hoichi and the workers in their home, and Linda took care of the food, hospitality, logistics, and of having a landscape crew living with the family. As years went by, John bought property after property adjacent to the garden to allow for more expansion. The original 5 acres grew to 12. The vision of the garden as more than a pretty place took hold. Hoichi's philosophy of connecting people with nature, of the garden being a place where people could decompress and find inspiration, also resonated with John. He had felt that very thing in Japan and then in Portland. The two began dreaming of gardens as healing spaces, of being fundamentally important for people of all kinds. This idea has become the guidance for what we do at Anderson Japanese Gardens. The two would also go on to build the garden at the Rosecrans Youth Alcohol and Substance Abuse Treatment Center in Rockford. That garden has changed the lives of young people with serious addiction and behavioral issues. It was John's insistence that the facility have a healing garden, and that the metaphor found in the garden, the many metaphors focused by Hoichi's insights, would impact the kids in a profound way. Initially, the CEO of Rosecrans wanted nothing to do with the garden. They needed facilities for treatment, after all, not a garden. But John has a very strong will. He virtually made them build the garden after resiting the building on the land, and then set out to raise money to build the garden, which the Anderson family generously contributed the bulk of the funds. I was hired in 1989. I remember a moment, it was probably 1990, when I was mowing in the front yard of the house. John drove up with some guests. They went into the house. He came back out a little while later and asked me that please, in the future, when people arrive, turn the mower off. And I responded a little bit coarsely, and I said, we have so much to do, and I'm just trying to get my job done. And he said, this isn't about you or about me, it's about our guests. And it's that culture of hospitality that he discovered in Japan and then transmitted on to me and the crew that has been really the way forward for what we do at the garden. I'm very grateful for all that John has done to build this garden for people to be positively impacted, to touch their soul, as he says. It has been a marvelous journey for all of us involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. John Anderson is not here, but we do have a 33-year critical employee of the garden who's worked with him and Hoichi, and his son, David, who's been director of the garden for 10, 12 years, and there were about 12 directors in the 10 years before that, so not an easy position. So questions that you have about the garden, the vision, how it's come to be. So if you will ask them, I'll repeat them for the Zoom audience and the recording, and we'll have a conversation. Yes. process. So by 2000, the healing garden idea is clear, but was it there from the start? And if not, how and when and how and why did it evolve?
Tim, you want to take
Sure.
that one?
So this is live here, right? Yeah, okay. So I know that it was really early on in the construction process. There was a project, Huichi tells the story of walking back up towards the house at the end of the day with all kinds of things happening, and he asked John where he thought this was going, and John didn't really know, and Huichi said that, you know, this is really about something bigger than you and me, and that in effect that this is an opportunity to create something that can help a lot of people. That was very early on in the process, and so at that point, John just had this idea of a Japanese garden that felt great, and that he could share with his family and bring his family up in that kind of environment as well. And so I think Huichi's ideas of connecting people with nature via the garden were really pretty well formed by that point, and it was now a chance to maybe develop that a little more completely with John. So I think the basic idea was there from the beginning.
And if I can interject, because I kind of worked on the history of it and interviewing Hoichi and John and Tim and looking through a lot of old photos and documents and other people who were involved, that the pond site, the original pond, was a disused, abused area. Local teens would go and get drunk, and there'd be beer bottles and cans. And so first it was healing the environment and turning a negative into a positive. So that sense of not creating just something beautiful or Japanese or authentic, but healing an environment that then maybe came to the Anderson family. And just one other thing, that when that first pond was finished, John Anderson had been very competitive in business, in racing sailboats and other things, and it was always about go, build, create, maybe dominate, win, and then he inscribed in the cement, stop and
smell the flowers.
Smell the flowers.
Yeah.
And this was his own lesson. No, winning, success isn't about winning, it's about realization of something bigger and deeper. And that was a gradual process, but there was a kind of epiphany. David, from your perspective.
Yeah, like Tim said, you know, my dad always talks about how those gardens in Japan made him feel, you know, when he was with Akira Ono on his trip in the late 1960s and then again in the early 1970s. So, though I don't think he set out per se to make a healing garden, there was always that feeling of how it impacted him. And I think as the garden was open to the public, you know, years and years later, that we could see the profound impact that it has on individuals. We get handwritten notes, we get voice messages, we get all sorts of things explaining the power of nature and the power of the garden and how it positively impacts people. It's pretty special. It's really special.
And maybe again that I think, Tim, you didn't talk about this, but that it was a family garden, and David, you played hockey on the pond, and the pucks are still dug out of the pond muck 30 years later, but that pretty early on that it was opened, and Don, you didn't mention this, it was open to church groups and garden groups in Rockford and then beyond, and the bus would come to the Anderson house, and everybody would get off the bus and go into the Anderson house and use the bathrooms, and then go down to the garden, and Mike Elena, curator, and Linda Anderson would lead tours. And then they'd start to feel that feedback, the feedback loop from the public who's coming in. This is special. And then it evolved the feeling and the kind of projected, the flow of that positive energy as new parts of the garden were added on.
Indeed.
What did it feel like to you, David, when all that is happening? I mean, you're a teenager and all that.
Yeah, well, when I came back, I graduated from high school in 1989 and would go away to college right after that. But I'd come home and I'd sleep with the windows open, and there's all these people gathering outside my window going for the 9 o'clock tour. I'm like, Mom, come on. But no, that did happen, yes. But, I thought it was pretty cool that people wanted to see the backyard. And, I had a fort up on the hill. I'm sure Tim's crew took it down. I spent, years building that fort. It was a lot of fun. And, I'd fish in the garden. I'd go out canoeing or fish in the pond. It wasn't really the garden at the time. It was being developed as the garden. But the transformation of this, and just the involvement with Huichi and his crew, because, they'd go out for Swedish pancakes at 6 in the morning, and I'd get to go with them like once or twice, a visit, and they'd have dinner in our formal dining room every night that was prepared by my mother. Just interacting with the crew. So just being involved and see this, I felt like as part of the crew, I was more getting in the way than anything. There's a few pictures I know that we have yellow Tonka trucks in front of the guest house. Those were from my brother, but that's what it was. We were part of the crew, and we just loved this, what was happening in our backyard.
Okay, other questions? Thank you, Larry, for starting us off. Must be others. Yes.
Yes, I think I heard that whole question. Are we supposed to be repeating the questions then? Okay, so you're wondering about the program for the teens at Rosecrans? Yeah, and whether that's still an ongoing program. It is an ongoing program. COVID threw a loop into that thing last year, but we re-engaged this year, and it's been a pretty cool thing. Catherine Marsh is actually in charge of that program now, and we have the Rosecrans kids come typically once or sometimes just once this year. Yeah, one time, but up to like eight kids at a time, and they go through a whole. It's a 2-hour thing, and so it's the kids that have been really on good behavior are the ones that get to get out of their confinement at the treatment center. I mean, it's a loose confinement, but I mean they can't leave the place, and if they're well behaved, they get this little bit of freedom, and then once we get them to the garden, then Catherine takes over, and it's an opportunity to talk to them about things like respect and principles of tea, harmony, respect, purity, tranquility. And so many of these kids have got nothing but trouble in their lives. And so just to get them to see out beyond themselves and that, taking care of a garden, they work in the garden for an hour or so. And sometimes taking care of something is a really good treatment of its own. And, nurturing something outside yourself, I think sometimes that transmits to nurturing your own self. So it's really a great thing, and we want to really amplify that over time and move out into other populations that are have issues of various kinds. And we know the garden can do magic for people, and we want to really keep that. Really, health and wellness is where we're really headed in the future. We do lots of cultural programming, but I feel like within the cultural programming, in particular tea study and so forth, there's great lessons in there that we can all as a staff absorb and then project that back out at the community. Anything to add there, Dave? Yeah, we have AA comes, Alcoholics Anonymous meets in the garden once a week for about 8 months. We have grief management things going on in the garden. We have walkways. We have a new walk for wellness that was recently developed. That's by a psychologist. We're looking forward to moving that program forward. So there's a lot of things that we're doing to get people in the garden, to just surround them by all the what Hoichi calls the positive distractions that layer by layer you peel that stuff away from your mind, just leaving open receptivity so that you're looking forward to what's coming and there's something good coming, and slowly get rid of all the dust in your mind, if you will.
To try and connect this back a little to meeting John Anderson, who's not here, but the sort of vibrations and ideas coming off of him, that he's the patron, he's the visionary, he's the go-ahead, buy the land, but he also planted, Tim often calls him John
Packus Anderson.
Because he loved to plant.
Which that might not mean anything to many of you, but Pachysandra is a ground cover that flourishes in our climate, and I've also called him the Prince of Packy. But I mean, he has it's his own therapy, really.
Yeah. That's my point. That it started as a house garden, kind of living. He's living with it, but he's even right till the present. He's still down on his hands and knees sometimes, not all the time, but if he's not planting, he's less happy.
If he's not planting, he's in a golf cart directing someone to plant. And we shuffle a lot of things around. We're editing all the time out in the garden. We're making new additions. He's very restless that way. I mean, he continually wants to improve, and it's kind of a hallmark of the work that he does is that Kaizen, gradual continual improvement. That's him. He's always trying to make something better, and the garden is that way. So yeah, he's out there a lot, and we work together on a lot of things.
So even though it's now become a public garden and he no longer lives there, or, it's now Florida or like Geneva, there's maybe still that sense of, it's my backyard. It's personal.
Yeah, it's very personal. And up until a couple of years ago, he used to keep a pair of dirty jeans and work shoes in his office, and I'd have to go out and find them on if we had a big decision to make in a timely manner. I'm like, hey, Dad, you really should be in the conference room with us and not out here planting Pachysandra. But that was his therapy, you're right, and just getting out there and being a part of the garden, it's very, very personal for him. And what he really loves is to see this impact on people. I think that gives him great satisfaction to know that his passion is positively impacting a tremendous amount of people.
Yes, Reiko.
Well, the garden. Oh, yeah. Okay, Reiko had asked, she had never been to the garden, and if it really reflected, the design of the garden reflected my father's life story. Is that accurate? So there was no master plan for the garden, and we acquired neighboring properties over, several years. So I don't think the original vision was tied to his life story. It was tied to, how did it make him feel? And he really gave Hoichi, a lot of latitude on the design. He obviously was opinionated and, would modify things, but Hoichi was a night owl. He would stay up sketching, and my dad and Hoichi would review sketches in the morning. We still have those sketches. I mean, they're huge sketches on tracing paper, and we probably have 40 or so, maybe
There's
more.
Quite a number of them. Some of them are on legal paper. Some of them are on cardboard.
It was whatever was there, you know, to create an idea.
I don't know, does that answer your question? It's, so no master plan, and it doesn't really flow so well from a traffic perspective right now, and we're greatly underparked, but I mean, the garden itself is absolutely gorgeous. The garden flows well.
Yeah, so the garden kind of, it was really kind of an organic evolution. Starting with the main pond, you know, below the bluff, and that was it. That was the garden. But then John wanted to do something with the Japanese architecture, and so then the guest house idea came up, which is built by master craftsmen from Tokyo, and so then there was that opportunity, and it was lots of drawings to figure out like where that could go and what it would look like. And then it was built. And then it'll be like, okay, what's next? Because John is a restless guy. He doesn't, I can't ever imagine him retiring like his dad Ralph. Ralph worked, he came into the office well into his 90s. Mm-hmm. And so he's very restless that way. And so we'd get done with something and he wanted to do something more. Well, sometimes that required the acquisition of new property. And so then a deal would be made with a neighbor and buy their house and sometimes utilize the house we used one of the houses for a visitor center for a visitor center and event area. And then it was eventually torn down and other things happened. So every time there was a property acquisition, a new opportunity was created. And that's just how the garden kind of morph from one phase to the next.
To wrap up, because I want to give plenty of time for Doug to talk, and if there is time at the end, maybe we can come back. But I think to answer your very good question, Reiko, since we're kind of talking about biography and the person in the garden, to my perspective, for whatever it's worth, is that it's less a reflection of who he was and more a projection of the better self that he wanted to be. And since I had not known that he had invited the Turtles, an LA band, to Madison, Wisconsin, happy together, the big hit, there is a quote, "Imagine how the world could be so very fine."
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that really, I don't want to be facetious, but it was he and Hoichi working together, and let's imagine a better world that's fine for us as patron and artisan and family, and then community and world. So with that in mind, let's thank David and Tim.
Thank you.
I don't know if I can work the Turtles or pop music into introducing Doug Roth. I won't try. But Doug, there you are. So if you were at the banquet, and I think many of you were last night, we honored Doug and Tamao, a team, you and me, but I think, and Tamao stand up there, people of many talents. Tamao, a fine artist, a researcher. I'm an art historian, and I end both my modern sculpture and modern art classes by talking about Tamao's father, who was an important artist, and the legacy of at least Tamao's family and their vision as a team, as Hoichi and John are. So I think just Doug is going to speak, but if you both want to. So without further ado, Doug and or Tamao, please take the podium. I know you have some prepared comments and then time for questions.
Thank you. Marissa said, "You're going to have 15 minutes to talk about whatever you want." And I said, "Whatever? Whatever I want? Are you sure?" She obviously doesn't know the whole story. So we'll give you something to shake things up a little bit. But before that, I want to continue on what I said last night, that every one of you has some very, very special talent or knowledge that you bring to our party here, but every one of us also has a huge, vast area where we can still learn and improve. So if you think of it as a big pie, a big, big pie, there are many, many, many slices. And you might be really well informed about one slice of the pie, but there's 20 other slices that you can explore if you wish. And if you start exploring some of those other slices, you can go forever. So, as educators, are among the many, many things that we try to emphasize, the biggest thing is to try to present a true interpretation of the Japanese tradition to our readers. And it's often not the same thing that you're going to read in a book or on a website or in a public garden brochure. We have we feel a much more honest, accurate interpretation of it that reflects a Japanese family's life. So I want to talk about that briefly. I know you're tired of listening to people talk, so yeah, try to make it pretty quick. All right, I got to learn. So the theme of this talk is Suki living. What is it? What does it mean? Which one do I press? All right. So Tamao and I live in Maine for most of the year with our dog Rocket. That's Rocket. And behind us there are blueberry fields. So Maine is a lovely place to live, and many people from all over the world come to Maine every year. They all come up Route 1, and they say, you know, they came from Connecticut or Philadelphia or somewhere that where it's crowded, and they go, we can finally relax. We can finally have some peace of mind. I think you're familiar with this idea, right? That's the modern world that many people live in. Over the past century, more and more and more people have moved to urban areas and suburban areas. And they're living in very, very crowded conditions. And they get really burnt out by that. And a lot of them want to come to a place like Maine to let it go and try to find themselves. So we have this tradition in Western countries of going out into the country to find something healthy. We jump in our car and we drive up into the mountains to go, in this case, fly fishing. By the way, did you know that Jeanette is a fly fisherman? Fly fisher woman? Did you know that? Sorry. Or we jump into our car and we drive to the beach to see the ocean. Or we jump in our car and drive to the lake to go sailing or fishing. What's the theme here? What did I just repeat over and over again? We jumped in our car to go somewhere else where it was beautiful and inspiring. Okay, we all get that. We've all done that, right? Japan has an idea kind of like that, but it's better. The Japanese idea is to take that special quality and to bring it home. It can be a desert scene, it can be an ocean scene, it can be the Yosemite Valley, it can be whatever scene the homeowner wants. But it's an attempt to evoke natural patterns and bring them home into the home environment, and you don't have to get in your car at all. You don't have to go anywhere. It's with you all day long. It's a profound, profound thing. And you're all involved with this. You're all involved with this, and you're calling it, you know, the Japanese garden world. But I want to tell you, it's bigger than that. It's a profound living environment that's healthy and well tailored for our modern life. So this is Murinan in Kyoto. It's a private home built with the Suzuki style of construction. And this is the view from inside a home near there, private home. So if you live in a place like this, you don't need to go there because you have it all the time. Most gardens in Japan are viewed from inside the house. You don't need to get out and stomp around. Not only do you not need to get into your car, you don't even need to walk. It's right there. It's right there for you every day. And I know that if you see such a beautiful garden, you're going to be focused on it. You're going to think, wow, I want to look at this, and this is so special. But I got to tell you, the homeowners, they're just going about their life. They're just waking up, and they're like drinking their coffee and reading the newspaper and making, getting ready to go to work or whatever. They're just going about their life. But this is soaking in. They're not looking at it. They're not studying it. They're not thinking about it. But this is coming to them all the time. We propose that this is the real Japanese tradition. A nature-inspired environment around the house. Like that. That's a house. Yeah. So in the Western world, I shouldn't say the Western world, in a European culture, the house has thick walls and small windows, and at night it gets all locked up, and you're on the inside. But the Japanese tradition, the privacy barrier, the wall, is on the far edge of the property. It's a wall or a hedge or a fence around the whole property. So the line that separates inside from outside is not the wall of the house or the front door. The wall that separates inside from outside is the wall way, way out there on the other side of the garden. So the garden is on the inside. The garden is interior. It's inside. Sorry. So you have your, you have your kitchen, and you have your living room, and you have your bath, the room where there's a bathtub, and a room where you have a restroom. Those are two different rooms, by the way. Really clever idea. Why can't we do that? The restroom and the bathroom are separate. Brilliant. Okay, anyway, you have all these different rooms, and then you have your garden space out there too, and this is all your living environment. Living room, kitchen, yeah, your garden space, you have your foyer, your genkan. It's all your living environment, and it's all on the inside. Westerners, when they hear the term garden, they think outside. So I think there's a problem here. We keep saying garden, 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 and everybody that hears it is thinking outside. And I'm saying, no, this is on the inside. Yeah. There's so much misinformation out there, and we battle it in our magazine constantly. There's so many things that are presented as, this is the Japanese tradition, and oh my goodness, it has nothing to do with religion. Please stop talking about religion. Talk about human beings. Talk about human ergonomics. Talk about human sense perception. Talk about the lovely, lovely natural world and bring it into our lives. You don't need to talk about religion. It's not these big, giant park-like spaces. Yeah, they exist, but that's not the core tradition. There's so many things that people think of when you say one of these terms, and they're thinking about an image that's not correct. Our magazine has done a variety of research projects. One of them, which is very controversial in this room, is that we sponsor our rankings of gardens, public gardens in America, and we rank them from the highest quality one on down. And many of you in this room had participated in that survey. And for a while, Anderson Gardens ranked #1. For a while, Portland Gardens has ranked #1. We're going to do the survey again soon, so be ready. But anyway, another research project we did was we examined census data from the Japanese government. There are 120-some million people in Japan. More than half of them live in single-family homes. Among those single-family homes, more than half of them are individual structures and not like multiple units. What do you call them? Condos or something like that. There are a lot of single individual freestanding houses in Japan. How many public gardens do you think are open to the tourism trade? A little over 1,000. We have an active database about that too. And there's about 1,000 pretty well-known gardens that you can visit in Japan. You pay money, you go in, walk around, get tired, go home. That's the tourism trade. For every public garden, there are over 10,000 private residences with nice gardens. That is an unreal ratio. That is crazy. For every famous garden or tourism garden, there are 10,000 homes, all with beautiful homes, with beautiful spaces around them. Junko here grew up in one, right? Right? Reiko, your neighborhood's filled with them, right? Her grandparents had one. Many Japanese people know about this. But guess what? Tourists can't visit those places. When you're a tourist, you get off the airplane, where are you going to go? You're going to go to Junko's house? Knock, knock. Can I come in? She says it's okay. Most tourists don't have the chance to see private residences. It's very difficult to get into private residences. We organize a garden tour in Kyoto twice a year, up until 2 years ago. And we'll start again sometime soon, I hope. But our garden tour is intended to take our tour participants into private homes and meet the families, see their homes. It's really lovely. But the ordinary person can't do that. So they go to some tourist spot, they pay their money, they stomp around, get tired, and they go home. That's not the real tradition. That's an inaccurate representation of the tradition. The real tradition is at Junko's parents' house, her grandparents' house. That's the real tradition. So our magazine has been trying to present this idea for a long time now, and we started to call that environment the Sukiya living environment. And that word, Sukiya, you've heard it already today. It's an important word, Sukiya, Sukiya. And that's the traditional form of residential architecture in Japan for the past 400 years. So we like that word to represent this tradition, this living environment. Sukiya-style architecture, Sukiya-style carpentry. We are now using the term Sukiya-style garden. They all kind of go together. That's what we're trying to tell people about. And guess what we're trying to not to say? We're trying not to say the word Japanese garden. Oh. We avoid it. We avoid saying that term. I feel guilty when I say it. Every time I say that term, I feel like I'm miseducating somebody. There's problems with both the word Japanese, and there's a problem with the word garden. They're both got problems. So now I try to say either Sukiya style garden or Sukiya living environment. So this is the big picture that we hope everyone here might think about a little bit. You're very, very familiar with your slice of the pie, whatever that is. But we're hoping that you will give a little bit of thought to what the real tradition is, and maybe try to learn a little bit about it. And if you would be willing to use the term Sukiya style every now and then, boy, we'd be really happy. Yeah. So those are that's the main message of many, many messages we have that we want to say and talk about. That's the main one. It's a living environment for a family, and it involves their home and the interior spaces, and also another space which is still on the inside. Getting to it right here. Where is it? Oh, I want to conclude with a message. Sorry, we could have, if we had more time, we'd show you all of these. Where is it? We're at the end here. What happened? Sorry. Okay, that's the main thing we want to talk about. We want to present this new concept to some people, old concept to other people, the Sukiya living environment. In Japanese, we call it Sukiya Seikatsu Kukan. Yeah. So thank you. I know you're tired. It's the end of the day. Do you have any quick questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
So you're taking people to Japan, taking them to the Sukiya gardens and people's homes. Do you have any sense for what the impact of that experience is on those people?
The people that do our tour participants? Oh, it's so obvious. They hear us talk about this, just like you just heard us give this, idea to you. They hear it, they read the magazine, blah, 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 blah. And then we take them to someone's home, and we sit them down in the living room, which is called the Ozashiki. And we introduce the family to them. They meet the kids. They start asking the mother or the father about what their life is like, what their hobbies are like, and all this time, the whole environment is just soaking in. And it's such a wonderful experience. And we walk out onto the street when it's over, and they all say, I got it. The light bulb comes on. They say, I got it. I know what you're talking about now. They needed to see it with their own eyes. They needed to feel it with their own body. But the experience of going into a real home is meaningful. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Continuing on the same line, what's the effect of this invasion on the Japanese family?
Oh, well, okay. They like meeting people and showing people their home. Yeah, they're open-hearted. Yeah, although I'm aware that if we bring too many people and we act too poorly, we might not get another chance. Yeah, that happens sometimes, especially on rainy days. And the Genkan is very small, and all these gaijin are coming in with all these ponchos and boots, and it's a mess. Japanese people travel with little tiny umbrellas. Pop, umbrellas up. And then when they go into the building, pop, the umbrella goes back into their bag. It's very clean. But our guests aren't so talented. So yeah, we sometimes don't get invited back. But usually the person is very big-hearted and happy to meet so many people. Plus, we try to give them gifts when we leave. So most of our tour participants bring a little present. Yes, sir.
How do you see, the growing urbanization, living in, big cities and high-rises affecting the concept and the practices,
In Japan? In Japan, people have this image of Japan being this really tight, dense place. That's because they're only looking at the areas along the Shinkansen bullet train lines where there are people piled on top of people. But if you stretch your legs a little bit and get a little bit further away from those trunk lines, Japan is vast, it's big. Its population density is not that great. There are many countries in the world, many European countries that have a higher population density than Japan. Japan has a lot of beautiful mountains and open space if you just get out of the tight places. And in those areas in the countryside, there's so many beautiful homes. So many, they're everywhere. And they're cheap. They're almost giving them away. Really, just go on YouTube and say, free Japanese house. Some towns are giving them away because they want, people to move out there. Yeah, so the tradition is alive and well. Maybe not in the tight, dense areas, but a little further out, it's alive and well. And
people are moving from cities back to countryside.
they are now, right. By the way, did you know that Kuniko, where's Kuniko? Where is she? Kuniko, his wife Kuniko, was born on a little tiny island in the middle of the inland sea. Did you know that?
With a garden.
With a garden, yeah. Yeah. There's many open spaces, lots of elbow room in Japan if you get out to look for it. And our premise is that this formula, this Sukiya living concept, is becoming more and more perfect for modern life, not just in Japan, but everywhere. Everywhere. Yes, sir.
In Japan, what's your best guess at the percentage of people living a Sukiya style lifestyle?
Well, living in a traditional house or a house that has at least one tatami mat room, okay? That's probably 30% of the people. Yeah. Nationwide, yeah. Some houses are kind of like Western style houses with just one section. Has a tatami mat section. Maybe they use that to eat dinner, they eat dinner there, or maybe they use it as a guest room or whatever. But it's not a dying art. The guy who was talking about the tatami, was talking like there's no more tatami rooms and they're disappearing, but that's not true. Not true at all. We take our tours to a model home village where there's a dozen homes for sale to Japanese customers, current buyers, current home buyers. And these homes are just like model homes, and you can go in and you can see anything you want. You can look in the bathroom, you can check out the kitchen, whatever. And almost every one of them has at least one tatami mat room. So the new homes that are being sold, single family homes, an awful lot of them still have at least one tatami mat room. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So, here in the States, a lot of the residential architecture might not lend itself to the traditional.
Right. Right.
What suggestions or tips might you have for people who maybe don't necessarily have that architecture and they can,
It's so hard for them to get it if they haven't seen it and experienced it. It's so hard. I wish there were more opportunities. And there are opportunities in some public gardens across the country. There's like 15 Japanese houses in North America that are in public gardens that could be used as, come on in, sit down, hang out. What do you think? Would you like to live in a place like this? Anderson Gardens has one. Huntington has one. Chicago Botanical has one. Philadelphia has a gorgeous house. There's many of them. But they're not being sold as living environments. They're being sold as some kind of precious thing. A lot of times they're not even open. A lot of times they have this nice treasure and the public never even gets to go in there. So the public comes in, walks around the garden, gets all tired out and goes home, and they didn't even see the most important thing. The key concept. The key idea wasn't even presented to them. That's terrible. Anyway, I wanted to mention that when we get hired to do garden consultations, we go to the customer's house, and the first thing we do is we go inside. And they say, don't you want to come around back? And we say, no, we want to go into your living room. And then ultimately, almost always, the first thing we say is, you got to spend a lot of your initial budget on tearing that wall out. You got to get rid of that whole wall and replace it with glass. And then we can talk again. Yeah. So that's how it usually plays out. Okay, there was another question? Yes, sir. Yeah, lovely. Uh-huh. And where was that? In Rosecrans? Oh, Roseville. Yeah, of course they would. Of course they would. Everybody wants to live in a lovely place with gardens that are coming into you, and you don't have to go stomping around. They're there for you when you wake up. Oh, it's gorgeous. Of course they want to live there. Right? Yes, sir. Oh, he's a carpenter. Right? Is that the carpenter? That's the real thing. That's a carpenter. Yes. Right.
Do you have a plan on what time in all of this and things will publish somehow, or a subscription online?
Yeah, that's really, that's a good comment, and we know we need to upgrade our act, or at least I need to clean up my act. Her act's good already. Yeah, we would like to make it at least searchable where you could. Oh, you like that idea? Okay, sir. Sir, you want that too?
I want to be able to tell me what magazine it's in, so I don't have to spend 2 hours like flipping through a bunch of
Yeah, okay. All right, we hear you. All right, so we hear you. So at least we want to have an online searchable database so people know at least which magazine to look in. Yeah, okay.
You don't want to reveal your information.
Yeah. Right. Okay. We hear you. Okay. And we've also heard from some people that they want to be able to pay digitally instead of having to write a check and mail it back, and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Okay. We have time for one last question. One quick question, if there are any. Yeah. Okay. So, I know it's the end of the day. I know you're tired of sitting there, and I really appreciate your listening to what we have to say. I'm grateful. We're grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doug and Tamao, for that presentation and for 20 plus years of Skia living. You want to read every edition cover to cover, and NAJGA ad at the back, but as an art historian who analyzes images, the cover says a lot of Skia living. Of all the photo books and magazines of Japanese gardens, they almost all show the garden. And Skia living over and over shows a person, often Tamao, sitting, relaxing, inside with the garden outside. And that's the crystallization of the idea, at least as it strikes me. So thank you again, Doug and Tamao. Thank you, everybody, for today. And we'll see you tomorrow at 9.
I want to introduce the director of the Portland Japanese Garden, whom you all know, we all know, Steve Bloom, who is going to make a special presentation today. Steve?
Thank you, Larry, and good morning, everyone. So what a great conference it's been so far, yes? It's fantastic. Well, this morning I'm up here to honor a very special person, Makoto Suzuki, Professor Suzuki, from Tokyo University of Agriculture, and I'm going to embarrass you and say all kinds of nice things about you, Suzuki-sensei, so brace yourself, prepare yourself. How do you recognize a giant, truly a giant in the field? When I first came into the Japanese garden field 16 years ago, I was only 35 years old, and before I ever came to Japan, the reputation, the name of Suzuki-sensei preceded my very first trip to Japan in terms of who I needed to talk to and who was the ultimate authority in the field on the Japan side of things. I think I mentioned the other day how I had gone on this perspective tour across the United States, North America, to see Japanese gardens, and everywhere I went, as I talked to people about who else I should be seeing, who else I should be talking to a person, it was always came back to Suzuki-sensei. And so certainly on my first trip there, I was scared to death because already in my mind he was this giant figure in the field of Japanese gardens in Japan, and I wasn't quite sure what to expect. And in Portland, we have this relationship going back with Tokyo University of Agriculture back to our founding as the designer Takuma Tono, who was a professor also at Tokyo University of Agriculture, designed our garden. And so we had this long history with the university, and here I was coming to the university for the first time and to meet Suzuki-sensei. Once you meet Suzuki-sensei, all of that fear goes away because you find out just what a kind and endearing and wonderful and compassionate man he is, and he has been on an individual basis and for all of us in the field as we've moved forward. He has just been the rock on which this association was founded, and for me he has been without a doubt, he has been my greatest mentor in navigating my way through the Japanese garden field from the very beginning, from the day that I entered this field. And I had the distinct pleasure of having a fellowship in Japan for 6 months in which Suzuki-sensei offered that they would be our host institution and that he would be my sponsor for those 6 months while I was in Japan. For that fellowship, for the Portland Japanese Garden, for our initiative to begin NAJGA, the doors that Suzuki-sensei opened at every turn, his ability to know exactly the right people to talk to at the right time and the right place to move our initiative forward was really quite remarkable. I've never seen anything like it, and all with such a kind and gentle hand. Somebody who has so much respect in the field often also has a huge ego. And then one of the wonderful things about Suzuki-sensei is that while he wields all of this influence and all of this knowledge and all of these networks, it is done without any ego at all. And I think anybody who has met him will appreciate that. Not only in our fields has he been a giant, but also in his teaching as a professor at the university. And because I was there at Tokyo University of Agriculture, in the graduate studies room there with some of the other graduate students who were attending, I got to see firsthand his interaction with his students. So not only with professionals in the field, but even more importantly, I think, with his students. And to watch how he takes those students under his wings and how he guides them and puts them, again, in the right place at the right time to advance them, not only in terms of their studies and their careers, but as people and as human beings. And that is really remarkable, and I think a quality that we all can ever hope for in having people who are mentors and teachers and senseis in our own lives. And he introduced me to so many of those students, some of which I still have a relationship with today, some of whom have since then come to Portland to study, and all because Suzuki Sensei could see a vision for where these relationships could be important and what it would mean to that student's life to advance them. And so this is the kind of person that Suzuki Sensei is, the kind of professor that he is, the kind of mentor, and the kind of leader for all of us in this entire field. I am so proud to call him a friend, to call him mentor, to call him sensei. And I think all of us here today owe him a debt of gratitude for all that he has contributed in so many ways. So with that, I would like to ask Suzuki Sensei to please come up and receive this award on behalf of the North American Japanese Garden Association.
スティーブさん、どうもありがとうございます。それからNAJGAの皆さん、どうもありがとうございます。Well, I speak in Japanese.
I have the honor to be a translator for him, and he speaks quite a good English, and I don't understand, but I will try the best to tell how he appreciates this event.
私の研究テーマが海外の日本庭園というか、外国の方が日本庭園をどういうふうに思ったり感じたりかしてるかというのが私の研究テーマで、もう40年以上それを研究してきているので、こういった賞をいただくのは本当に栄誉なことです。
I am very much humbled to receive this recognition because I spent all my 40 years of my life to try to introduce Japanese garden in the outside of Japan, and then I try to let the people understand true Japanese garden. So this is a very much an honor to receive this.
Well, I'll tell you all the story of beginning of the study on Japanese garden outside of Japan. The starting point is in France. That's the theme. I will give you the session from after this ceremony. So thank you very much anyway, all the people here, and thank you very much, NAJGA. Thank you.
I don't think I have to translate for him. He so appreciates very much. Thank you, he said.
Thank you so much, Professor Suzuki. You were also one of the first people that I connected with when I started with NAJGA, and I appreciate all of your guidance and advising throughout even my short time with NAJGA. So thank you so much. We really can express all our gratitude to you. So now we're going to start this next session, which will be on our strategic planning process. If you are signed up for the first session of maintenance for wood structures, go ahead and head out. We'll meet by the plaque over here. So we're really excited in this next session to share with you the future of NAJGA. We have embarked this year for about 10 months now, trying to basically develop a simple but actionable plan. Can you all hear me well? For what NAJGA will do for the next 5-10 years. And so the work of putting together this plan has really been guided by our governance committee. So this morning, I have the pleasure of introducing our governance committee chair, Kelly Sutherland McLeod, and she's going to talk a little bit more about the process. But aside from playing an amazing role, serving as chair of our governance committee, She is principal in charge, project architect for her firm, Kelly Sutherland McLeod Architecture. Her firm's projects have been recognized by the American Institute of Architects, California Preservation Foundation, Los Angeles Conservancy, and Long Beach Heritage. She was project architect for the nationally recognized conservation of the Gamble House, a national historic landmark designed by Charles and Henry Green in 1908, and for the restoration of the Japanese house located at the Huntington. Kelly also teaches in the USC School of Architecture's summer program in historic preservation and lectures at institutions and preservation conferences around the country. So we're very lucky to have her as our governance committee chair. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you, Marissa, and good morning, everybody. As chair of the governance committee delegated by the NAJGA board to coordinate our strategic planning process this year, I welcome you this morning. Today, we will engage with you in thinking about our next decade together. As you came in, well, I think there was supposed to be a slideshow, but I didn't see the slideshow. Was it on? Mm-hmm. Okay, I was too busy talking to you two. Okay. There's a wonderful slideshow that you're going to see.
Yeah, thank you for, there you go. I think you have to click. So, should tell you slide one, slide
Oh, wait,
two.
you want me to go through this?
Yeah, if you
Oh.
can. Do you mind if I stand next to you?
I would love for you to stand next to me. I'm always happy to stand next to you, Jeanette. Okay, so from our early days of connecting through the Japanese garden field in North America, a loosely knit group of Japanese garden designers, professionals, administrators, horticulturalists, preservationists, cultural art practitioners, academics, educators, students, business owners, and Japanese garden enthusiasts, we formed and developed a successful nonprofit dedicated to ensuring the sustainability, enduring value, and social impact of Japanese gardens in North America. We've grown in size and capacity, and during the last 10 years. We've delivered on our commitment to provide ways to connect and share information through biannual conferences like this one, with the exception of COVID. But even during the COVID year, we made huge advances in our ability to connect with each other and deliver high-quality educational programs digitally, over 50 last year alone, and thanks to our wonderful Marissa. Yeah. Over the last 10 years, we've worked with you to create dynamic regional programs, hands-on workshops, glimpses into privately held Japanese gardens, rare and unique opportunities. We highlighted your businesses, your education programs, and raised the visibility of our field. We've fostered relationships that have resulted in many collaborative projects. We've also recently concluded the merger with JGO, which vastly increased our web content, and now with these joint resources, the way is paved to present even more content and value to each member. And we've created international alliances in Australia, Japan, and the UK, while continuing to grow our North American garden contingency. We've all been busy. You have been busy. Let's pat ourselves on the back and celebrate success. And let's pause a minute to realize that maybe our most important achievement is we've all become friends. We've always cared about our Japanese gardens, and now we know and care about each other as well. And so energized by our camaraderie and sense of purpose, in January, the NAJGA board, 22 dedicated volunteers, embarked on a strategic planning process. As I mentioned, the governance committee was asked to oversee this process. We began by talking to our 5 standing committees. We asked them to tell us about their successes in implementing our last strategic plan, their current needs, and their suggestions moving forward. Then we began to reach out to our stakeholders to hear what they had to say. What did they think about how we are doing? What did they want us to do next? Did they have concerns, recommendations, etc.? We're 10 months into the 12-month process. I'd like to invite Larry Rosenweig, our soft-spoken, very dedicated, hardworking president, to give you a summary of the strategic plan process. Thank you for being my slide person.
I think that's you, Larry.
Thanks, Kelly. So, what we were really committed to doing were two sort of Japanese-inspired approaches to running our organization. One being sort of Kaizen, which is kind of known in the business community with the definition of sort of continuous positive improvement. So we see this as a process. The plan that we make today, there's every likelihood and possibility that tomorrow conditions will change. We've all just been through a pandemic that nobody planned for. It wasn't in our last strategic plan, I can assure you. So we recognize that we have to continually plan and execute and be nimble in changing. And perhaps just as importantly, there's the sort of Japanese concept of nemawashi, which we thought was especially appropriate to a Japanese garden organization. It literally means sort of turning the roots, and it's sort of what you do when you're, say, transplanting a tree, that sort of thing. And but it more generally means running things by, you know, everybody, getting input from everybody from the bottom up, not just making decisions, you know, from the top. And so, so this process, as Kelly said, started with our committees reviewing what they had done and coming up with great ideas for the future. We did a number of surveys online to our various constituent groups, got a lot of feedback through that. And then we did a series of individual interviews, and we did roughly 30 of them. We tried to select a cross-section of our community, so we had garden, you know, public garden leaders, we had home garden owners, we had horticulturists, we had, you know, just sort of trying to get every constituent group, get some input from them so that, again, we were really hearing from the whole field and taking their ideas. We asked people what they valued most about NAJGA, how they even defined it. Essentially, you know, how did people see our mission? We asked what were really the best things, the 2 or 3 best things NAJGA's done. We also asked if there were any concerns, problems that, you know, that we needed to address. And then we also asked about kind of the long-term vision. So we didn't want to just think about, okay, well, what did we do yesterday that was good or bad? But what exciting ideas do people have? And the wonderful news is that we got a couple things out of this whole process, the combination of committee reports, surveys, and the interviews. And you can see here, there was real consensus about 2 things that are really the great values and importance of NAJGA. One has to do with learning. So it's the training, it's the programs like this, it's also the knowledge base that in large part that we just talked about contained on our website and growing every day. that speaks to at various times to different individuals and organizations. It's the journal, which includes a lot of original research as well as other articles. So we're creating knowledge, we're conveying knowledge, we're vetting that knowledge, and we're making it accessible. and clearly that's something everyone values. And the second thing is really the networking, the connectivity. It's what we're all doing here. When we go home, we'll all think about interesting things we learned, but we'll probably think more about who did we meet or reconnect with, and what kind of neat ideas did they have, or what future collaboration might come out of it. So we're really now able to boil down our mission and really where we're headed, focusing on these two things, the learning and connecting. And then to dive deeper into that, we looked at, well, what could make it even better than where we are now? And we heard these 5 things. Obviously, especially in the last couple of years, we've appreciated the ability to learn and connect digitally and virtually, but we also missed and love the hands-on, in-person opportunities. So we now see, whereas before COVID, really, our virtual connections were minimal. It wasn't really a major part of our program, and now we see what great possibilities there are there. But we also recognize the great importance of being together and in person. We also heard that something NAJGA can do that we can't necessarily do individually is to really promote, provide public outreach for Japanese gardens as a whole, as a field, as, raise the water of the recognition, and, all of our boats will float. Another thing, I think, because this is what's going on in our world, we're all concerned and dealing with climate change, environmental issues, and I think there is a lot of support expressed for NAJGA taking a stronger role in addressing both the global kinds of climate change issues, and specifically what can Japanese gardens do, both as a field and perhaps individually in your own communities. So, these are the kinds of things that we've tried to then boil down into an actual plan with those of you, who do this kind of planning for your own organizations or your businesses. We set goals, we set objectives under those goals, and then there's the actual work that, consists of tasks, specific tasks to move you toward achieving those goals. And I want to add, in addition, so we have these big goals and sort of broad objectives boiling down to specific tasks. But one of the beauties of the interview process is it was really open-ended. And so we got all kinds of really fascinating, interesting, creative ideas. Now, they may have only been expressed by one person, but that doesn't mean they aren't worth listening to and paying attention to. And so we've been trying to look at some of these just great comments and creative ideas to build into the plan, whether or not they were necessarily, sort of consensus or broadly held, but some of the best ideas may just come from one person and one mind. So we feel like it's been a pretty full process to get us to the point of creating this plan for the next 5 years, but it really leads us into the next decade, as we said, recognizing that we will have to adapt along the way. So we had input from, or I should say, we did this, we created sort of charts and graphs to show, how many people were saying what, so that we could really look at the top issues and ideas. And I think the process helped us to understand and to gather input really from across the field, and to create what we think is a strong plan. But we're not finished. And part of what we want to do today, which we'll get to in a few minutes, is to gather more input and feedback from you all. So don't go away. So I'm now going to, so I've talked about the process, and now Jeanette is going to kind of walk us through the plan as we've put it together to this point. So, thank you. Jeanette?
If you ever need a guy who can think on his feet, this is your man. So where we are now in trying to explain to you what we've done was the strategic plan. And I know many of you in the room were participants, either through your committees, through stakeholder interviews, but we want to bring all the effort to you all so that we all get on the same page. As Larry said, it took a lot of listening. We want to listen to you. We know that the energy and the wherewithal to move NAJGA forward comes from you. We do not want a strategic plan that gets written by a small group of people and it looks real pretty and it sits in somebody's desk drawer for the next 5 years. And then we pull it out and we go, oh, what were we supposed to have been doing? We want a strategic plan that is dynamic, that is a living document, that really benefits from a broad input, and that's something that we can all buy into so that we bring our individual energies and focus to the process. So we've developed this toolkit for the strategic plan to try to help disseminate what the plan is and to try to help get all of us. There's the NAJGA community today in the 3 dimensions that we tend to think about it, in human culture, horticulture, and business culture. We have about 225 individual members. We have 110 organizations. There's sometimes multiple people involved in those organizational memberships. And we have 31 businesses. This is a core of people that know about NAJGA and are engaged and are working collaboratively together. But we don't feel that this is a static community. Rather, this is, you throw a pebble into the water and you get the ripples that come out. NAJGA is going to expand. If we're to achieve our goals of sustaining Japanese gardens, then the community of people working on it needs to grow.
So just a quick review so that we all have it top of mind what our mission is. NAJGA promotes the sustainability, enduring value, and social impact of Japanese gardens in North America. So there won't be a test after this, but we hope that as we go along, we'll all sort of make this part of our vocabulary. We'll know when somebody asks us, what is the mission, that we have our 30-second elevator speech ready. The NAJGA vision statement is something that, does morph. It does evolve over time. And I'll just share with you all that the board is evaluating the vision statement again to keep pace with where NAJGA's key areas of focus are developing. NAJGA core values, these have been the same since the initial conversations about what an organization could do. And they were derived from the NAJGA project when we spent time going out and talking to you all and listening to you and hearing about what you thought, acknowledging the diversity of the field with the many different people and entry points. This was never intended just to be an organization of scholars, nor an organization of public gardens. It was conceived of as a community, and that I don't think will ever change. We appreciate the grassroots of the field. Coming from a small garden myself, I don't have top-down resources, sometimes not even top-down support. So the only way to grow is to grow from the bottom up. And serendipitously, the Japan Foundation shared with us early on that's the approach they were interested in. And that's what helped garner the original 3-year grant that helped us incubate NAJGA. I think it's something we can all embrace. And respect for existing North American perspectives while fostering greater connectivity and exchange with Japanese experts through an affinity with our Japanese consortium partners. I think Takeo Uesugi's hallmark phrase of sincere collaboration fits into really understanding this subtle and layered approach, but so important for our success. We've identified these key areas of focus. You've heard them, and I'm kind of echoing what Larry said. We focus on promoting sharing information, fostering connections, research and scholarly activity, advocacy and public relations, and we provide access to expert training. So, strategic plan, what is it? Some of us, muck about with strategic planning and organizational stuff all the time. Some don't have to do that, or maybe formally. But basically, a strategic plan is a roadmap that leads an organization into the future. It's hard to get to someplace if you don't have an idea of your route, how you're going to get there. So it defines where we want to go in the next 5 years. So we're thinking 10 years, 20 years more down the line, but we're really focusing on what we can accomplish in the next 5 years. This will identify big picture vision, goals, and objectives that have been derived from who we are and from all of you. It determines actions needed to accomplish the long-term growth, build or obtain core capabilities, and address structural and cultural challenges. And importantly, but not frequently discussed, is establishes investment and resource allocation priorities. So we have a lot of creative people in NAJGA, and there's a lot of ambition. We have to define our resources, both financial, human resources, and we're going to need to prioritize in order to move forward together in a way that benefits the field and benefits all of you. Larry mentioned this, what kind of our thinking, our approach, how we're going to do it. Of course, we're going to do it together. You know, we must work together because, you know, long term, nothing else really works. And Kaizen, change for the better, continuous improvement is kind of a hallmark of our effort, and nemawashi, turning the roots or laying the foundation. I am new to this term, but once I was introduced to it, I felt how appropriate for us to think in those terms. And it's really about preparing for change. So how we do it. So you've heard over the last 10 months that governance and executive committees worked as a planning team to coordinate the first phases of the process. So NAJGA committees played a key role, and the planning team also participated, and the NAJGA board has been involved all along the way, and they reviewed the inputs, and they've directed the NAJGA manager and the planning team in the creation of a living document for 2022 to 2026. What's in it so far, after listening to everybody and really trying to say, okay, that here's a problem, here's an opportunity, here's a need, how can we organize these under some key ideas? You know, we can only remember so many things in our brains, and 3 things is something usually all of us can remember. So we have 3 strategic goals and corresponding objectives within our key areas of focus that will guide us over the next 5 years. And these are the 3 major goals that bubbled up from all of this effort. Build the NAJGA community, expand content and connections, and increase sustainability. I know those are broad. They may go, well, duh, but other things will follow under each of these headings. This is 5 objectives under Build Community. So improve understanding of existing and potential audiences. Expand the diversity of NAJGA members and partners, increase membership by establishing and achieving annual membership goals, and promote awareness and appreciation of North American Japanese gardens, increase varied networking opportunities for members. This is one of the most important things we can do. It's the #1 goal, and those are 5 objectives. Many, many tasks will be identified for each of these objectives. Goal #2, expanding knowledge creation and sharing. I'm not going to read these because I'm worried about my time. Can anybody tell me? When do we leave? Oh, Marissa, how much time do we have? Okay, 20 minutes? Okay, I am just going to show you these then, because we want a minute to do an exercise with you. I think this is just all logical, except one point here. Strategic planning is not so difficult to do when you have well-functioning committees and volunteers, but we aim to do better than that. We want all the individuals to have an opportunity to participate and to get more involved. So it's a key idea, it's a key goal here, and we have some ways to facilitate that. We want to do a breakout group in whatever time we have left here, and we're going to pass out a handout and try to engage you to talk to each other. Choose one of the objectives. I'll put that screen back up on maybe Build Community, which is an important one, and we'd like to get some feedback from you on that today. We want to make the plan real. We don't want it just to be a plan. The planning process was helpful, but it comes to naught if we don't actualize the plan. So understanding what's in it, once it's finished, it's not finished, we're still creating it. We will have a finished plan in January, and we will distribute that to everybody. Be involved at your garden, through your committees, and as an individual. If you're someone that's working as an individual, we want you to participate as well. Read and discuss the strategic plan when we send it to you. Align goals to the strategic plan. Keep it on your mind and on your meeting agendas. Provide input and ask questions in person and through a porthole, which we'll explain. Make best practice suggestions representative of your areas of expertise and/or your team. And remember that strategic plan is a living document. It will change as NAJGA grows and as we face those challenges and change in the environment in which we work. So we plan to put everything on the website so that you'll always have access to resources, videos, articles, presentations. And I don't think we have actually created this special email account yet, but it will be coming, and all of that will come out to you. Okay, thank you. And then now, if you could organize, either stay at your tables or otherwise, can I have the PowerPoint come back up, because I'm going to put it on the page that had the objectives. He's working on it. Okay. So you've got your handout. You'll put the objectives back up. How do I go backwards? Yeah, let's go backwards. Okay, let's go to the first one. Okay. We'd love for you to choose one of these objectives, your table. We'd also ask that somebody at the table serve as reporter. How much time do we have?
We have 10 minutes, and then we'll report back.
Okay, we have 10 minutes to pick an objective, talk about it. The idea is we'd like your name and contact information on this sheet of paper. We're going to collect them. We'd like whatever thoughts. We know this is a short amount of time, but if you see an objective on there that you would like to help achieve, and you can think of a task or something you can do that would help advance that objective, please write it down, put your name down, your contact information, and we'll be in touch. Thank you very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. I would like to thank you for accepting my speech and to excuse me for my bad English. I propose the following order. First, professional background. Secondary presentation of the Japanese garden of the Oriental Park, history and development, etc. Third, my personal commitments and action for the restoration of the Oriental Park and the organization of network at regional, national, and European level. For origin of the project and objective of the future network of Japanese garden in Europe. My professional background, horticultural teacher, director of the Park Oriental Park in Bolivia. I am responsible for the restoration and development of the site and mayor of Molévrier. I am consultant in a group of voluntaries experts on the management and development of parks and garden open to public from 2007 to today. Departmental councillor and then vice president of the Maine-et-Loire Departmental Council, president of the Association for the Creation and Promotion of the Network of Japanese Garden in Europe, created in December 2019, and president of the Park Orientals Association since July 2020. Présentation Oriental Park. History. Alexandre Marcel created the Japanese Garden of Molévrier between 1899 and 1910 by converting the existing park on the adjacent Chateau Colbert. The owner of Chateau Colbert are his parents-in-law. Alexandre Marcel is a famous French architect. It's a passionate architect from Japan and Southeast Asia. He was inspired by the large working parks of the Edo period. The river that flows the property from east to west inspired for Japanese garden. It's a aerial view, 29, it's Chateau Colbert. Alexandre Marcel, he created a lake on the river, on which he created the Crane and Turtle Island. Around the lake, he installed Japanese artifact, red Japanese bridge, sculptured beach, lanterns, torii, azumaya. But he integrated Khmer's artifacts of the Universal Exhibition of Paris, of which he was one of the architects. It's a postal Universal Exhibition in Paris. It's around the World Pavilion. History for the park. Alexandre Marcel did not leave any written records. Did he leave prints? Only period photographs have been found. We found postcards and photographs of the Alexandre Marcel family. Thanks to these documents, contact could be established with a French specialist and then Japanese professor. It's park photo 2010 postal card and photograph Alexandre Marcel family and his daughter in Japanese clothes in the park. The gardeners of the time did not have any particular knowledge of the art of Japanese garden. They maintained the park like a romantic English garden. The gardeners are not pruning technique of Japanese garden. After 1940, the park was partly transformed into agricultural and forestry exploitation. The Japanese part was not maintained between 1940 and 1980. Oriental Park, it's a fallow park. In 1980, the Japanese part of the park was classified and protected by the state, around 10 hectares. In 1980, the park was defined as an arboretum, romantic park, with the artifacts from Far East Asia, which which later gave the name of Oriental Park. And the Montlévrier Municipal Council, both this part and the agricultural and forestry part, around 29 hectares, and with that not-profit association to undertake research and clear this property. After my assessment for the reconstruction of Japanese atmosphere and the valorization of the garden. After several years of clearing and researching on the history of the garden, the directorate of the site, its state, and the town council and the association contacted French garden specialists and Japanese specialists. It was in September 1987 that Professor Kawara and his assistant at the time, Makoto Suzuki, came to conduct an on-site expert. Thanks to this visit and the expertise chair on that very day, the Parc Oriental Association committed to a restoration program upon agreement of the directorate of the site and the municipality owning the garden. The objective was recreating the atmosphere of the large walking garden of the Edo period. Since rebuilt the park by the Japanese ambience of the large walking park of the Edo period, Azumaya. Today, we want to respect the work of the Alexandre Marcel by preserving the identity of his garden. Each year, we have an important program of planting azaleas, Japanese cherry trees, Japanese maple trees, and many plants of Japanese origin adapted to our Japanese garden. Every year, and the Japanese building from the time of Alexandre Marcel have been rebuilt. For example, Red Bridge and Torii on the Crane Island and Turtle Island. Actually, today, currently, we are developing the island on the setting sun, and we have many projects for the development of the Japanese steel space and the construction of reception building at the entrance to the Oriental Park. Every year, many activities on the park. There are several events and activities every year. For example, Anami in March, Kodomo Noi in May, National Bonsai Exhibition in September, Koyo Momijigari in October, November, and all year many conference, guided tour, educational events. Sorry. I'm sorry. Thanks to variety of horticultural and tourist network support, I have been able to become more professional in my approach and win numerous awards for the garden and the association, national awards and international award. Today, the association is still alive, but composed of about 75 volunteers, about 20 permanent employees, and about 20 seasonal contracts in the summer. On the garden, which we call welcomes, around 150,000 visitors per year. For your information, in 1987, there were 1 employed and 1 intern and 15 volunteers. My personnel to Molevier Parks and the creation of the network of the garden. In 1996, I set up the first regional network of garden, all type of park and garden. In 1998, during the year of Japan in France, I organized the first meeting of the manager of Japanese garden in France. Then, between 1998 and 2009, I organized and participated in the implementation of several European programs on the topic of historical parks and gardens. This networking allowed me to collaborate with partners from the United Kingdom and from Germany. It is programs related to tourist reception, educational activity, and signage in garden. My responsibility to the municipal council and the department council obliged me to leave the management of the Oriental Park. I remained a member of the referent association and the responsible for the landscaping project to the Oriental Park. Free from all professional obligation and always garden lovers. It was a pleasure for me to accept the president of the Association of the Oriental Park in July 2020. In July 2020. For many years, our association has welcomed Japanese personalities, ambassadors, and numerous Japanese delegations. It's, for example, visit of Professor Fuji for tree pruning, and many delegations several years. Origin of the project of the Network Japanese Gardens. Origin and objective of the project of the Network of Japanese Gardens in Europe. My experience of creating network of garden and tourist site and of organizing programs on a European scale led me to imagine a network of Japanese garden in Europe as we share the same problem, whatever our respective countries. Yoko Mizuma was willing to work on his hand with me in an ambitious project, and we went from the beginning to work on several issues. Our numerous exchange with Japanese institutions in France, as well as with Japanese and European academics, confirming the following objective: to develop our knowledge exchange and share the art of the Japanese garden. Their history, their present, their future, to develop and organize programs, workshop, conference, symposium, training for all gardeners and those responsible for Japanese gardening in Europe. To enable and support European and or Japanese academy research to allow the greatest number to better understand the history and the art of the Japanese garden, and to improve our visitors' knowledge of our garden, art, and Japanese garden, Japanese culture, traditional or and actual. To exchange and the problem of welcoming the public in our gardens and sharing knowledge with all public, children, students, adults, to create privileged links between Japanese garden in Europe and between Europe and Japan, to enable European gardeners and those responsible for Japanese garden in Europe to travel to Japan and to envisage and facilitate exchange with garden in Japan. At present time, we have a list about 120 Japanese gardens in Europe, and the next few weeks and month, we will organize a video conference to present our project calling for a network of Japanese gardens in Europe. We are planning to organize a series of lectures in March 20 and 22 for future members of this network and interested people, and a meeting in the form of presentation of the workshop in the park of Malévrier will be proposed in June 20 and 22, and then to follow the creation and the official constitution of a network of Japanese garden in Europe. My conclusion: we are convinced of the need to organize our garden into the network to meet their needs and expectations. And our project must be a long-term one and must allow everyone to find their place to listen and to. Thank you very much for your attention and for your indulgence in the imperfection of my English and the feed by my French accent. Thank you.
So I am very honored today to make this presentation. So thank you very much for your invitation. So I'm a landscape designer called paysagiste in French, and I'm a doctor in landscape science. I've been in Paris for 13 years and working on several projects, both scientific and practical. So I'm one of the partners of Jean-Pierre Chavassieux for the project of the creation of a network of Japanese gardens in Europe. And I'm in charge of several tasks, particularly the coordination between Japan and the organization of events. So today I'll talk about our activities and the future activity plan of the network. Oh, sorry. So as explained, Jean-Pierre Chavassieux, we wanted to create a European network of Japanese gardens for a long time. It was finally started in 2019. And first, we contacted several key persons in the Academic Society of Japanese Garden, so Nihon Tengakai, and the Japanese Institute of Landscape Architecture, such as Zoengakai in Japanese, such as Professor Makoto Suzuki and Professor Eijiro Fuji, etc., as well as contacting several Japanese organizations based in France, such as the Embassy of Japan, the Japanese Cultural House in Paris, called La Maison de la Culture du Japon Paris in French, which attached to the Japan Foundation. And then the organization called Council of Local Authority of International Relations in Paris, called CLIA. So we have also approached some research institutes for scientific support. Now we are working together with the East Asian Civilization Research Center, one of the leading centers in Asian research. To start this project, we planned to organize an international symposium and a general meeting to create a network office in 2020. But because of the global pandemic, we had to delay this symposium several times. The poster you see here, this one we prepared for the symposium, we tried to hold this autumn, but finally it was rescheduled again for next year. So in spite of everything, we are not giving up. By next year, we will continue to work toward 3 approaches. So first one, between November and February 2022, we are launching a campaign of individual meetings with some representative Japanese gardens in Europe, one by one. So through these meetings, we will make our initiative known, establish a good connection, and get more partners. So maybe you know, but in Europe, there are about 200 Japanese gardens. So we have already taken contact with about 30 Japanese gardens, and their reactions are very positive. So we will continue to contact the other Japanese gardens in Europe. And second action is international symposium. In March 2022, we will proceed the international symposium, which had been planned for 2 years. The content will be mainly maintained, but the way of organization will be modified. It means that it will be only online, not on site. So after this symposium, in June 2022, we plan to hold a workshop which was originally integrated in the symposium. we plan to realize this by inviting the team of Japanese gardeners. So now I would like to explain this about the symposium and the workshop in more detail. Yes. So first one, about the International Symposium in March 2022. So with this symposium, we would like to address the subject of Japanese gardens in Europe. So it will consist of 3 sections. So first one concern Japanese garden in France. So the first, Professor Nicolas Fievé, one of the well-known researchers in France, will address the question of the definition of Japanese gardens. And after that, Jean-Pierre Chavassieux will explain the case of the Oriental Park of Montlévrier, which is considered as one of the important examples of Japanese gardens in France. This session will be moderated by Professor Suzuki. And second section concerns specificities of Japanese gardens in Europe. The objective of this session will be to clarify the particularity of Japanese gardens in different European countries. So now there will be 4 presentations. So first one, we plan to invite Ms. Hiromi Matsugi, a researcher attached to Nichibunken, International Research Center for Japanese Studies at Kyoto, and Mrs. Gilles Braguet, a researcher at Willett University College in England, and Mr. Christian Dagsold, a professor at Heiligheim University in Germany. We also plan to invite Professor Eijiro Fuji to listen to a lecture about insight into Japanese gardens in Europe and their specialties. This session will be moderated by Professor Stéphanie de Courtois, assistant professor at National School of Architecture of Versailles. The third section will deal with the subject of the gardener's experience. We plan to invite gardeners, agents of communities from different European countries which own Japanese gardens, and a representative of Japanese garden network existing in Europe to share their experience with us. For example, the gardeners of a Japanese garden in Hasselt in Belgium, and the Japanese garden at Schönbrunn Place in Vienna in Austria, and Jacques Soignon, ex-director of the city of Nantes in France, and a representative of the Association of Japanese Gardens in Denmark, etc. So this session will be moderated by Mrs. Hiroko Endo, landscape architect and professor attached to the Japanese Cultural House in Paris. So Maison de la Culture du Japon à Paris. So based on this symposium in March, we plan to hold a workshop in June by inviting the Japanese gardeners of Ichizokai. The Ichizokai is one organization of first-class landscape architects and construction managers established in 1988. So maybe you know, I think, yeah. So we plan to invite about 10 gardeners from Ichizokai to organize a workshop day. So this workshop will consist of 2 subjects. The first one about cutting niwaki, and second one is stone setting. So this workshop will be moderated by Professor Fuji. And in conjunction with this workshop, we will hold one official meeting for the creation of a Japanese garden network in Europe. This meeting will be open to everyone. So we invite, in particular, the associations of the Japanese gardens existing in Europe, sure, and some professional organization of landscape in Europe, like Valor, for example. So Valor is the French interprofessional organization in horticulture, forestry, and landscaping. This organization leads several interprofessional projects, and they are very interested in our project. So until a network is founded, we have created an association called Association for the Creation and Promotion of an European Network of Japanese Gardens and Far Eastern Garden Art. The head office is located in the Oriental Park of Moribui, and we are so now creating a website, and we plan to open an account of several social networks like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, etc. So we will complete all these tasks this year. And for communication, we use an email address on Google, as well as our own addresses, like here. So yeah, so this is the small presentation of activities. We hope that this initiative will create a lot of dynamism towards all the Japanese gardens in Europe, and will give rise to many interesting exchange projects. So thank you for your listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve-san. And my presentation has been already recorded, so please switch on. It's a convenient way to do. No? No sound?
The need for a regional network of Japanese gardens. Japanese gardens provide a unique view of nature rooted in Japanese culture. No matter where the gardens are located, they also provide a window into local environments and communities, and a means for international exchange. The garden is a living work of art that requires ongoing support by the diverse local communities. Therefore, there is a need for an appropriate regional network in which the Japanese gardens can help each other. This is our homepage showing how many Japanese gardens are open to the public. A 171 Japanese gardens open to the public in Europe. From the Meiji period on, Japanese gardens were constructed around the world. In the past 2 decades, the popularity of Japanese gardens has increased, with an average of 10 new public gardens opening each year. According to a survey by the International Center for Japanese Gardens, TUA, there are 625 Japanese gardens open to the public in the world, and 171 in Europe. This is the graph of number of distributions of Japanese gardens outside of Japan by region. "40 in Germany, 27 in France, 27 also in the UK. The beginning in Europe. International Exposition in Vienna, 1873. This is the first Japanese garden open to the public. And then the Japanese garden outside of Japan in the World Expo in the 19th century. The first one in 1873 in Vienna, the second one in Philadelphia, the United States, and 1878 in Paris. Then 1889 Paris again, 1893 in Chicago in the United States, and the turn of the century, 1900 in Paris again. (1873) Paris Expo, and the next one 1889 Paris Expo again. Those are looks like private house gardens at that time. After the 1889 Paris Exposition, Watsukehata stayed in France for gardening activities. He worked at the Ugo Crafts Midori no Sato private Japanese gardens. And there are some of them Japanese were walking out in Europe. Midori no Sato has been gone, but it was a huge Japanese garden at that time. In the latter half of the 19th century, Japanese culture was introduced to Europe and the United States, creating a Japanese boom, a development of so-called Japonism, Japanese fever. I'm showing some example of pictures. Japonism in Europe and America. A Japanese gardens fever began early 20th century. Paris Exposition 1900. Those two posters were designed by French people, even the left one. The Japanese exhibition in Paris Expo 1900. There were a Japanese style pagoda in 1900 Paris Exposition designed by French. Interesting. The Tour du Monde, it was called. The designer was French architect Alexandre Marcel. Pagoda at the Belgian King Laeken Palace. The five-storied pagoda and gate exhibited at the 1900 Paris Exposition have been relocated to Laeken Palace and are still in good condition. It was designed by Alexandre Marcel. I think he earned a lot of money by those design fee. He himself, Alexandre Marcel, created his own Japanese garden in his mansion. It was called the Chateau Colville-Malveille, and now it's called Parc Oriental du Maulevrier. This is the famous book of Josiah Kondo's Landscape Gardening in Japan. Dissemination of Japanese garden information through publication has begun in the late 19th century. The Flower and Gardens of Japan by Florence Duquesne, 1908. Europeans began designing Japanese gardens with books about Japanese gardens. This is the example of Japanese garden creation through publication in Germany. The garden imitates the photo Fukiage Gyoen in Konda's book, the right-hand side, and then created their own Japanese garden in the Garden Expo in Düsseldorf, the left-hand side. At the German Garden Expo, German-designed Japanese gardens were exhibited in Mannheim, 1907, Frankfurt am Main, 1909, and Breslau, 1913. This is the one in Mannheim. The oldest surviving Japanese garden in Germany, Leverkusen, created in 1912. Also, the old one, the Japanese garden in Karlsruhe, created in 1914, and it was renovated in 1967. It was expansion and renovation by Professor Keiji Uehara. The one example in Netherlands, 1910, Kurigendal's Japanese garden. This is the graph of the list of literature on Japanese garden in Western languages. It's getting more and more. The number of publication Japanese gardens in Western languages continues to increase. Let's take a look at Japanese gardens in the UK. Japan British Exhibition, London, 1910. 2 gardens from Japan were exhibited by the Japanese government. These 2 gardens, upper one and the lower one. One is called Garden of the Floating Isle, and the other was called Garden of Peace, the left-hand side. This is the graph, the creating of Japanese style gardens in the British Isles by decade, from 1810 to 1959, researched by Dr. Jill Raggett. Some example of the older Japanese gardens. Hill House Gardens, 1910. Tatton Park, 1910 through 1913. It was renovated in recent year. Compton Acres, 1914. The distribution of the Japanese style garden in the British Isles by Dr. Jill Raggett. Here are some examples of recent Japanese gardens created in Europe. Japanese garden in Bonn, 1979. Japanese garden in Toulouse, France, 1982. Japanese garden in Augsburg, Germany, 1985. Kyoto Garden at Holland Park, London, UK, 1991. Japanese Garden in Monaco, 1994. The Japanese Landscape at Kew, London, 1996. The gate was exhibited at the site of Japan British Expo. Berlin Marathon, 2003, in Germany. Japanese Garden in Florence, Italy, 1998 and 2012. Expanded. Toku-on no Niwa Garden, Norwich Cathedral, England, 2010. It was by Japanese Garden Society. Japanese Garden in Aksum Province, Kumamoto-en. This is the latest one. This was created in this summer. Recent publication in Japanese Gardens in Europe, Jardin Japonais en France, by Bernard Journal, 1995. Japanese Garden Society published the Japanese Garden in the UK, 2011. Christian Tagsvold, Space in Translation, Japanese Garden and the West, 2017. Horst Schmidt, Japan Garden in Deutschland, 2020. It recorded 40 Japanese gardens open to the public in Deutschland, Germany.
Voice, shall I say? You could see that. Well, already we do have the first one list of Japanese garden, as Yoko told, and list of supporters of Japanese garden, research and experts. We do, yes. And well, we are announcing via Facebook or some other media to get the people about Japanese garden owners and the enthusiasts to get together to create some association and support from Japanese garden organization in European country. That means, well, the UK, Denmark, and UK. They do have already, and also your NAJGA is the biggest association of Japanese gardens outside of Japan. That's why we were planning to present you what we did, but we couldn't make a symposium or the kickoff meeting. So today we are offering you the future information. Next year we will have online symposium, and hopefully we will have our on-site international symposium in Montpellier. As Jean-Pierre, first time I met him when I was, well, assistant professor with Professor Kawahara. There's only one person was hired by the park. That's him. He was a gardener. And then 15 or 20 years later, I visited there, and I couldn't get appointment to meet him. And Sunday morning, finally, we met each other on the garden. At that time, he was the mayor. So the story of Jean-Pierre is very, very interesting, because the Montpellier is a little of countryside. It's near Nantes and Cholet. It's really countryside, small city. And well, restoring and developing the Japanese garden and getting people to understand the culture of Japan make more and more visitors. Now, 150,000. And that's kind of, the visitors get the city get income. They refreshed their chateau to the contemporary style hotel. Yeah, and then renewed to the chateau, and then they started to renewal of the French style garden next to the chateau. The money from the Japanese garden. And so French people are so happy with this. And then Jean-Pierre, he retired to the mayor for 20 years career. And then he has been wanted to do share the so many experience what he had. And he now retired, and also I retired. Got some time to work on. So go forward, we did. We started in 2019, yeah. That's a story about that. Thank you very much.